What's up? I'm Coach Dan Blewett. In today's video, let's talk about pitching lessons. Should you pay for them? How often should you do them? All those good things. Obviously, I used to own a baseball academy. I'd done thousands of pitching lessons in my life. And so let's talk about it. Let's go through it. Should you be paying for pitching lessons? All right, so if you're new here, I'm Coach Dan. Check out the links in the description below. That's where you'll find my 2, soon to be 3 baseball books. You'll find my online pitching courses and other videos related to this one. So in this video, let's talk about pitching lessons. So again, I gave pitching lessons over and over the years, sometimes 14 lessons in a single day, half-hour lessons. And we would charge $100 an hour, and this was a couple years ago. And depending on where you are in the country, that's not even that expensive. It varies widely, but obviously you get what you pay for with instructors as well. So anyway, let's talk about how much should you be paying for a lesson. So number one, obviously cost of living is a big thing. I live in Washington, D.C. If you live here, you're going to pay somewhere between probably $90 and $150 an hour for any kind of personal training, any kind of like boxing, like one-on-one, pitching lessons, hitting lessons, all that sort of stuff, just because cost of living here is so high. Obviously, depending on where you are, it's going to be lesser, but you're in general going to get what you pay for. And if you're finding an instructor who charges, 20, 30 bucks an hour, they probably can't do that full time because it's so hard to make a living if you have all the overhead of a facility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So understand, we charged $100 an hour, but we had our own facility. We paid employees. We had to keep the lights on. There was a lot that comes out of that $100 per hour that, only a small percentage of it eventually trickles into my pocket and my business partner's pocket, where we could go home and pay our bills, buy our groceries, et cetera, et cetera. So just understand there's a lot that goes into it. That's just a little bit of the business side. But again, don't be afraid, unfortunately, that good instructors, they are expensive at times. Number two, if you want to lower your cost, group sessions are great. We did this at my academy for hitting and pitching and strength training too, where, if you have a group of 4 to 6 kids in a pitching class where they come in 2 or 3 days a week, it's going to be much cheaper per session than for a private lesson. If we were charging $100 an hour for a private lesson, our group rates are probably like $30 an hour. I can't remember exactly, something like that. So $15 for a half-hour session or $30 for a whole hour, whatever. And then you can afford to do that multiple times a week, which is great for some players, for most players, I would say, but not necessarily all players. Now, the big question is, do you need pitching lessons? And I think the answer is yes for almost all players. And the reason is, at team practice, it's just really difficult for a coach to spend enough time with a player to really help them make substantial progress with their mechanics, or teaching them a breaking ball or a changeup or any of that stuff. It's really, there's a lot of, obviously, as if you've watched my channel, it's complicated learning how to pitch. Like, my book is called Pitching Isn't Complicated, but it's not an easy thing to be really, really good at, especially to learn a changeup, to get the feedback that you need. It takes a lot of one-on-one contact time. So for a coach to do that when they're trying to get situational stuff in, get everybody their ground balls, their hitting, their bullpens, there's just a lot going on. So it's unrealistic to expect your head coach, even your pitching coach, to just get all that stuff done. So you're going to need to go to someone probably to have your son be able to keep up with the rest of his peers as far as improving his pitching and all that stuff. So let's talk about lesson frequency. This one's pretty simple. In the off season, I suggest once per week or once every other week. Less than that, and it just becomes a very sporadic monthly checkup, and it's hard for players to stay on track, and it's hard for an instructor like myself to also stay up with them. So in the off season, like October to March, depending on where you live, obviously, once a week or every other week if you're doing private lessons. If you're doing group stuff, it's going to be twice a week or 3 days a week. In the summer, like during the season, so high school season or spring season for youth players, every other week or once a month, or not at all if you feel like you're okay. You're going to have a pitching coach at the field. So you're going to have someone to help continue to keep you fine-tuned. And really, it's more like a doctor's checkup during the season. Again, every other week or monthly is totally fine. And if I don't see a kid that summer, if you feel like he's got it and his pitching coach is going to keep him kind of fine-tuned and he knows his routine, totally fine. One of the big things is what I really want to stress is, yes, there is value in pitching lessons, even if they get expensive. And I understand they can definitely be expensive. The big thing is your kid has to be a self-coach. And the self-exploration is very important. Even if you worked with me, I think I'm a good pitching coach. If you talk to my clients, they'd say the same thing, I hope. But even if you worked with me or some major league pitching coach, you're only going to see them, what, a half hour a week, an hour a week tops. And then you're going to spend all these other days, like all your other hours throwing with a friend or with your dad or with to a catcher or whatever. That's going to be on you. You're going to have to be self-coaching and making the adjustments, doing what your pitching coach told you to do. So I kind of calculated this out years ago. If you throw consistently throughout the year, and still take some time off, you'll probably make about 10,000 throws in a calendar year. That does factor in like a 2 or 3 month off season. If you just factor in all the practice throws, all the bullpen throws, the game throws, it's about 10,000 a year. The vast, vast majority of those throws are going to be made with no one giving you feedback except for your catch partner. So even if you did lessons with me all the time, it'd be only like maybe 1,000 of those throws or 2,000 maybe. That'd be a lot of lessons. So still like 90% of your throws are going to be only supervised by yourself. So a big problem with players today is they don't really absorb the info. They don't go home and practice a ton and really start to figure out, what are my mechanics? How do I feel when I pitch? How do I feel when I hit? This isn't limited to pitching. And how to be your own maestro, your own coach, and understand what you need to do. If you look at pro ball and college ball to a high extent as well, a lot of these guys, they're really their own coach. I didn't have a pitching coach in college until my last year. And I was just kind of figuring it out on my own. I read a lot of pitching books. I talked to a lot of people. I picked my coach's brain as much as I could. My head coach was an outfielder and my assistant coach was a catcher. So I had to be my own coach to a high degree. So just remember, you're going to grab little bits and things from everyone, but you have to encourage your kid to not be completely dependent on these weekly lessons, that they've got to take the lesson and they've got to go home and internalize it and make the information their own and really practice. And if your kid doesn't practice, don't expect them to be a high-level player. They've got to really, really love the game. They have to have a really deep passion for it, and they have to have a passion and a tolerance for the tedious work that they'll put in. Any Olympian, they're doing their Olympic, you watch these Olympic weightlifters, they're doing that same squat, that same snatch, that same clean and jerk hundreds of thousands of times. How many times does a snowboarder or a skier go down that same mountain pretty much, right? All these moves are extremely repetitive. I've thrown a baseball millions of times in my life. You've got to be okay with the fact that it's not super exciting on a day-to-day basis. That's a big thing about being a good ball player. So despite the fact that, yes, I do think lessons have their place and are important as a piece of the pie, but the big thing is players got to go home and practice on their own. And as an instructor, ask any instructor out there, and it's not it requires no thought, but basically like, hey, if you said who are your best students, who gets the most progress, who gets better faster, it's always the kids that go home and practice more. So the lesson, even if you do it weekly, it's still just a doctor's checkup. If you go home and don't do the thing the doctor says, you're not going to get healthier. You're not going to get better, right? It's the same thing with all this stuff with lessons. Final wrap-up recommendations. Off-season, once a week or every other week. Less than that, you're not going to make a lot of progress, I don't think. During the season, once a month or every other week if you really want to. But if your budget is stretched thin, I'd say go once a month or cancel in the summer and just lean on your pitching coach on your regular team. You're going to learn new stuff from every coach that you talk to, every coach that you have. Even if you have an amazing coach and then a not very good coach, you're still going to learn stuff from both. So just because you have a pitching coach at home that you really love and you just feel like everything he says is gospel, doesn't mean you can't not go to him in the summer and just lean on your pitching coach who maybe isn't quite as good, but still cares about your kid and wants to see him get better. So just, again, absorb everything you can, try things out, tinker. And again, you as a parent and as a player, you've got to be students of your craft, learn as much as you can. So parents, you can help your kids as much as you can playing catch in the backyard. That's a really big piece of the pie as well. And players, you've got to learn to be your own coach. So when you go to these lessons, to get your money's worth, you've got to be really internalizing what they're telling you and going home and practicing it and making it your own and beating it into the ground with so many reps, just reps, and put in the time. And that's how you're eventually going to get where you want to go. All right. So hopefully this video was helpful. If you have any more questions about pitching coaches, about lessons, group, like all that sort of training stuff, leave it in the comments below, and I'll see you here in the next video.